Hello and welcome to my tutorial about fine-grained admin permissions on Keycloak. I read about this feature a while ago when they introduced it with version 26.2, and they mentioned some example setups there, and one of them is delegating administration of members of a group to an owner of the group, and that really got my attention because I really like to use a feature like this in my productive environment because I use groups for features. So a feature maybe consists of multiple roles. Maybe it's distributed also over different clients. And so I have, for example, a beta role if the feature is new there and we only show it to people which have beta access. And then usually the role is split up in read and write permissions. And to decouple this a little bit from the people which are having access to the feature, we use groups. So we have a feature group, we put all the roles into the feature group which belongs to the feature, and then we have the members of the group which are the users which has access to the feature. Problem here is that this has to be done until 26.2 by the Keycloak admin team. So if someone wants to get access to a feature, you always have to call the admins or create a ticket or whatever. And so it's a little bit time consuming and put some additional load on the admin team. And that's why we want to get away from that and use this feature to help people use Keycloak a little bit more easier, and also help our people in our company to be able to do the administration of the groups by themselves. In the next two chapters, I'd like to introduce a little bit onto this feature, how we use it. There are more ways to do it. That's one example, so you can take this as a blueprint and develop from there. The first part will be just a simple setup of Keycloak entirely, so to make sure that we have an environment up and running where you can play around with, and then we go into the real part. So if you have already Keycloak there and want to investigate just the feature, then skip the first part and go directly to the second. So that's all from the beginning, so have fun, and hopefully this will help you a little bit. Okay, to start with the setup, we first need to run it locally on our machine. I use Podman to run the containers, but you can of course run also Docker or whatever you like. To start with this, we first create a network where we put the database in Keycloak into so that they can communicate with each other. I name it here Keycloak demo network. Then we need to bring up a PostgreSQL database. We can also use another database. I use PostgreSQL because I'm used to it, so that's why. Next thing is that I want to create a database for Keycloak itself so that it is not using the default one. So that's why we run PSQL on the newly created container. We create a user with very basic settings. Don't run this somewhere else. It's just for running it locally and make it easier. Later on, you need a different password and password. We create a database and assign the Keycloak user as an owner there. And we grant all privileges to this user. Of course, that's also no setup you will use in reality, but for running it locally, it's completely okay to do so. That's all so far. Then let's leave here. And now the last step we need to do is to run our Keycloak. This will take a while until he's up and running. And when he's running, then we can log in to the admin console. Okay, now let's start logging in here. As you can see, up and running, admin, and we are there. We get some notification here because it's completely unsafe, but it's just for demonstration purpose. That's the first step we need to do now. Keycloak is up and running. We have all our stuff around and so on. So perfect. Next thing is that we will create a realm to our configuration there and our demo setup. That's why I call it demo. Take care that the realm name doesn't contain white spaces or blanks. I made some very bad experience with that. So just call it demo, create it. Here we go. We are already logged in. Looks fine. The next thing is that we will create a client just for demonstration purpose as well. So it's also very simple setup. Let's call it demo app because we think it's our client that represents our application where we want to assign the users and the roles and so on too. So I skip everything else because we don't want to really log in there. It's just for doing the configuration. Here we go. We have our client. And now let's create a couple of roles there to play around with. In our case, I will create 4 roles. Let's say demo app A, role A, and demo app B. Yeah, just imagine your roles there. I don't know, read, write on a specific resource, or whatever. Now that we have some roles here in our client, we will also create a couple of groups. To make it a little bit more interesting, I create 2 feature groups, and then we will have different users which get different permissions so that you can see a little bit what's going on. So we call this feature group X and we call it epsilon. Next thing is that we assign the roles to the groups just to have it there. So in this case, we assign probably let's switch to that one. Let's say we assign A and B here. And as I mentioned, maybe we assign, I don't know, A, C, and D here as well. Just to have some setup there where we can play around with. The next thing we need to do, we need to create some dummy users here as well to play around a little bit with them. I named them now a little bit so that it gives you already an idea what this user is later on capable of doing with. So the first thing is we will introduce a feature admin, which is or should be able to manage the users in the feature group X. Say email verified. X. And then we have another user, which we call admin feature. And this one should be able to access both groups or manage both groups so that you can also see how to mix them. And last but not least, let's say email verified, otherwise we maybe run into some annoying pop-ups. And now we need a couple of users, so let's call them ordinary user 1 and ordinary user 2. So that should do it for the moment. Next thing is we will assign some password here. Again, just for testing, I use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In reality, you will use some strong passwords here, of course. But to show what's going on, that's sufficient. Both same password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that it's a little bit easier to deal with them. Okay, That's so far everything from our setup. Now let's try what these users can do so far, and I expect not much. Let's see if I'm right. Let's use the admin feature X, for example, signing in, and yeah, bum, you are able to sign in, but you don't have any permissions. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. So now we are done a little bit with our setup, so we can move on with the next step. Okay, now the real interesting part, chapter 2, fine-grained admin permissions for group. The first thing we need to do is we need to enable the feature. Therefore, we go to Realm Settings, Admin Permissions, and switch it on, click on Save, and then you can see we get a new permission thing here. About the permissions, it's a little bit complex, but when you got it once, then yeah, it's straightforward. You have two things. You have permissions and you have policies. As far as I understand, the permissions are dedicated for what you allow the user to do, and the policies are relevant for which users are feed into the permissions. Let's put it that way. So we have two different perspectives. One is the user group that a permission applies to, and another one, the permission itself. If we talk about permissions, we have permissions for 4 different resource types: client, groups, roles, and users. And we will use groups and users later on. But yeah, before we start, we need a little bit more to do. The first thing is that, as I said, we need to come up with a way how we can identify the users which are later on the members for a feature group. So let's use a group for that as well. We will create another group here. We call it feature X admin. And we will do the same for the feature other one as well. So now we have 2 groups, and we can use these groups for assign roles, which we later need for the feature admin to apply. Because it's not only the permissions, we need a little bit more. The first thing is that we need to assign 2 realm management roles here. The realm management roles we are using is query groups and query users. Only query groups and only query users, because that's what our feature admin later on needs to be able to do. So that's something we add to this feature X admin group. We can also add our feature X and epsilon admin there, because we said the first one is only for feature X and the other one is for X and epsilon as well. So we add both as members to this group. Now let's move over to the other group. Here's the same thing. So query users, query groups. And as a member, in this case, only the second one here. Good, so far so good. If we then switch back to our feature admin and try to reload, as you can see, is now able to access users and groups here. So that's from the query permissions, but he's not able to see anything. That's exactly what we want. So he's now able to access the stuff, but we need now the permissions which allow him to access the groups we want to. In this case, because it's the feature admin X, it should be able to see group X and it should be able to manage the users in this group. I usually create policies first, but you can also create a policies as part of the permission, but I feel a little bit more comfortable with doing it that way. Due to the fact that the policy and the permissions cannot have the same name, I usually use some suffix there to distinguish between them. So first thing, we want to have a group policy. So if we want, for example, to have the user feature admin X to be able to manage the members of the group feature X, then we need a permission and we need to feed the admin user to this permission. Due to the created groups before, we need in this case a policy for group. So we create the policy here, which covers the feature X admin group, so that we can later on use this policy for the permission. A little bit complex to describe, but if you are play around with it, you get familiar very soon. X admin, hopefully. So let's suffix with policy. Then we'll add a group. In this case, it's the feature X admin group. So that means that every user which is part of the feature X admin group can be used later on to apply some permissions to. We will do the same already for the other group. In this case, for the feature epsilon. And here we go. 2 policies. Very nice. The next thing is the permissions itself. So in this case, we want to allow people to access operations on groups. That's why we choose group. Again, we need some name. So I use the feature and then permission here. Here we need to assign scopes. You will find them in the documentation. I put it into the links, but just in our case, we need or we use view, manage membership, manage members, and view members. And the next thing is that we don't want to enforce this to all groups. We only want to enforce this to our feature group for the feature X. And as I mentioned before, we need a policy, which I describe it as feeds the user to the permission. Due to the fact that we created a policy already, we can select it right now, but you can also use create new policy here to create a policy directly. That's it. So now we created our first permission. We will do the same for the second feature as well. View members, manage member, manage membership, specific group, in this case feature epsilon, and again this one as well. So here we go. We have 2 permissions. We can try them here with the evaluation tab. Just let's use our admin X user. Let's say group, use the feature group X and say, okay, he wants to manage the members. If we evaluate now, it turns green because this user is allowed to manage it. To double check, if we change now to feature epsilon, which this user should not be able to do it, we will get a deny because the user is not allowed to deal with this group. So far, everything nice. If we now switch back to our user here and reload here, then we have some changes here. We can see in the groups, we see the feature group X. He's able to access the group and but he's not able to add any user because he's not able to see the user. And that's exactly the tricky point here, where I stumbled a lot, because you need another permission, because the managing of the users is a user related permission. And that's a little bit the tricky part. So you need a permission for the group and you need another permission for the user resource to be able to do all that stuff. Otherwise, the user will only see the members. So if I add now as a realm admin a member to the group, let's say we add ordinary user 1. And if we go back to members, then as you can see, he's able to see the ordinary user, but if you want to remove it, he gets a forbidden, because doing that is a user resource operation and not a group resource operation. A little bit tricky, took me a little bit time, also some help from the community, but finally I get there, and this was also the main reason why I decided to create some kind of explanation on that, because I think that maybe I'm not the only one, hopefully. So let's get back to the permissions. In this case, it's probably a little bit more easier. to deal with. That's why I want to create a new policy here. And this policy is now also a group policy. I made some good experience with group. You can also use others, but I feel most comfortable with groups here. And let's name it generally. Let's say, okay, we have a feature admins group, because we don't need to have this on a group level. We have one general policy which covers all the feature admins. And then we add all our feature admin groups here, because what we are doing now belongs to all the feature admins. So we don't need to distinct here. Now we have a policy which covers those two groups, means that we have both feature admins in the user collection or group, which is then permission applied. The next thing is we need a permission. In this case, as I mentioned, we need to manage the user resource. That's why I choose users here. Again, feature admins permission. I select now the feature admins policy. Enforce access to all users. Yes, that applies to all users. And now we need to deal again with authorization scope. So what should the user group or the users which are part of this permission, what should they be able to do? They should be able to view, and here this is the important thing, manage the group membership. If I click now on save and go back to my feature admin here, which is logged in here, we can now remove the user, and we can also add new users as well. And if I log out now with the feature admin X and log in with the X Y, then as you can see, I have now both feature groups available, and I can add users and remove users from both. So that's exactly what we want to achieve. So we have now two admins which are able to manage users in the groups they are responsible for. They can log in using the admin console. They can manage the users. They can do everything they want with them. And you as a Keycloak admin are out, but they cannot do anything else. So even if some buttons show up here, so delete, that's working. That's, by the way, bad. And they can also add users here. So bring them back. No, they cannot create, but they can delete. That's quite strange. Maybe it's a bug. I'm not sure, but yeah, we'll see. Good. So that's so far. So let's bring our ordinary user back. And that's all I want to show you. So just to conclude, we have 3 permissions here, 1 for each feature group and 1 for the users. And we have, for each permission, we have a policy. So means if you introduce a new feature, what you need to do is create a new policy, create a new permission, and extend this policy for the feature admin group. And that's everything so far. So have fun, and yeah, if you have some additional comments, just let me know.